I never thought my life would unravel in such a heartbreaking way. I went from feeling like I was on top of the world to living a nightmare. This story took place in the span of almost 5 years, so bear with me because I am going to try to provide a full context of my story. Let's go back about 5 years ago. It all started when I discovered the truth about my wife and my daughter's best friend's dad. Let's call him Sam. Sam finalized his divorce 4 months ago. My wife and I have been married for 14 years. We have a 13-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. Our marriage has its share of ups and downs, just like any other couple, and most of our problems have been centered around money issues. We work for the city here in California, and the cost of living is very high. We live in a wealthy neighborhood, not because we are rich, but the neighborhood was gentrified and we grandfathered in. My house has been in the family since the 1940s. I inherited the house from my father, who inherited it from his father. A lot of people have tried to convince me to sell, including my wife, but I refuse because it has sentimental values. Raising my children in a rich neighborhood means that we are surrounded by wealthy neighbors. Our kids grew up with rich kids. Since my wife and I had a low comparable income, we always felt like we couldn't keep up with the best things for our son and daughter because they wanted to keep up with what their friends have. One day, my 11-year-old son came home with an expensive handheld game console that I had promised to buy for him as a Christmas present, but couldn't afford it because other things took priority. The first time I saw him with the console, I thought he borrowed it from his friends. Then when he hadn't returned it in 2 days in a row, I asked him about it, and he said Sam, my daughter's best friend dad, bought it for him. Sam lives a few blocks away from my house. He is wealthy and divorced, and his daughter is the same age as my daughter. I asked my son why he went around begging people, and he said that he didn't beg, and that Mr. Sam asked him what he likes the most, and he told him about the video game. Then a few days later, he bought the game for him. I didn't know how to feel about that. I didn't know whether to thank the man or feel bad that I can't afford the console for my son without breaking the bank. When next I saw Sam at a volleyball game that my wife normally drives my daughter to, I approached him and thanked him. He seemed like a nice man with fit physique and tall. He was older than me, but he looked younger, maybe because he exercises often. He came to the volleyball game with his daughter. When he saw me at the game, he asked me about my wife, and I told him she was doing good. When I went home that day, I mentioned to my wife about meeting Sam. Even at the mention of Sam's name, I could see my wife's eyes light up. It was very noticeable, and she wanted to know about what he said about her. It was clear that she was fond of him, but I couldn't guess anything short of that. When my wife and I got married, we were the attractive couple that everyone talks about. But since we had children, we kind of let our weight go. Then 3 months ago, my wife started exercising and training for a marathon. She would come home and talk about how she went to drop off our daughter at her friend's house and how she and Sam spent hours talking about fitness. It sounded innocent, and she was open about it. My daughter has been friends with Sam's daughter for 2 years, so it wasn't unusual for my wife to drop my daughter off or pick her up from Sam's house. However, recently I noticed that she gets more excited when talking about Sam. I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right, so I started paying close attention to my wife. That was when I noticed how often she takes my daughter to Sam's house. She used to drop her at Sam's house and come back to run errands, but now she drops my daughter off and stays there. How did I know? I installed a GPS tracker on her car to see where she goes after. Her car was parked at the same spot till it was time for my daughter to come home. I didn't want to ask her why she remained in Sam's house for hours with my daughter because I didn't want to sound like I was accusing her of an affair. I would intentionally bring up Sam's name in our conversation, and she would get excited and talk for hours about how great he is, how he is so smart, and how much money and property he has. She would share things that made me believe Sam was bragging to her. I put on my investigator lenses and searched through her phone to see if I could find something. To my surprise, I found out that she was texting him more than anyone else. They were sending heart emojis and calling each other my love. I was hurt by this and felt betrayed. It was clear that the affair had been going on for about 7 or 8 months at least. Maybe she was the reason why Sam got divorced, because that was about the same time he filed for a divorce. When I saw the text messages, I confronted my wife about it, and she confessed about the affair, but wouldn't admit to me when the affair started. She begged for forgiveness, telling me that it happened by mistake, but I didn't believe her. We spoke about what should happen to our relationship, and I told her to leave the house for a while, so I have some space to think. Since the affair has been going on for so long, I couldn't stand the deceit. I didn't tell my daughter about the affair, which made it difficult to explain to her why she couldn't visit her best friend as she normally does. Unfortunately, that gave my wife the opportunity to manipulate my daughter and tell her all kinds of lies to turn her against me. She told my daughter that I was jealous of Sam, which is why I didn't want both of them to go over. She told my daughter that I was lazy. That's why I wasn't rich. After I kicked my wife out of the house, I told my children my wife and I are going through problems in our marriage. I didn't tell them about her affair or say anything bad about my wife. I first noticed that my wife had poisoned my daughter's mind when she started becoming unnecessarily rude to me. I grounded her by taking her cell phone. She got even madder and responded by saying that Sam would buy her another cell phone and a better cell phone. Her statement cut deep in my heart. I felt like I was losing control of my family. 2 days after my wife left, I saw from the GPS that she had been living with Sam since her car was parked there all through the night. That was the death knell of our marriage. Any hope of reconciliation was gone. I may not have money, but I have dignity and wouldn't allow myself to be humiliated in such a manner because of money. There are things in life that are more important than money, and that's loyalty, integrity, and honesty. And she had broken all of that. I called her and told her that I was getting a divorce. She didn't show any remorse. Instead, she texted me saying, "Good riddance. I can't wait." Words cannot explain how I felt on the inside. I was visibly depressed and didn't eat for 3 days. I was a robot, a walking dead. All my life, I did my best to make sure my kids were provided for, and my wife destroyed everything to start afresh with another man. Then one night, my daughter didn't come home. Since I took her cell phone away from her, I reached out to my wife. I called my wife to ask for our daughter's whereabouts, and my wife told me she is at Sam's house and would be staying there from now on. I was livid. I told her that she was out of her mind, and I want my daughter in my house now. A shouting match ensued with name-calling and choice words thrown around. She called me lazy, saying that I can't afford a wife like her, and how Sam had opened her eyes on how beautiful she is, and how I don't deserve her, and I have been holding her back for 14 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was filled with anger and resentment. I couldn't take it any longer, so I drove to Sam's house and called the police. When they arrived, I told them that I wanted my daughter, or I would break into that house and drag her out myself. When the police came, my wife had no choice but to release my daughter for me to take her home. I had some choice words for that snake, Sam. It was clear that he wanted me gone from his property because I was acting crazy. They didn't want to make a scene, which is why they let my daughter go. Goes without saying that my daughter didn't like the fact that I dragged her out of Sam's house with the help of the police. She hated me. She sounded just like her mother. I didn't show anger towards her because I knew who was telling her what to say. After that incident, my wife hired an expensive lawyer, paid for by Sam, and she was pushing for a fast divorce. I welcomed the divorce as soon as I was served, but I didn't agree with the custody arrangement, so we went to trial. She didn't want anything from me because I had nothing but an expensive house that she couldn't touch since it's been in my family and wasn't bought during our marriage. I soon realized that the reason why they got the expensive lawyer is because my wife and Sam were pushing for 100% custody, claiming that I was using the kids against her. The case was taken to trial, and I was blindsided when my two children privately told the judge that I was physically and verbally abusive. My cheap lawyer was terrible, the best I could afford. Her clever lawyer used my behavior at the night that I called the police for my missing daughter and how crazy I was acting at the scene. I was bewildered that she went as far as putting my children to lie to the judge. I didn't hold anything against my children. I had faith that they would grow up and remember that the only thing I was guilty of was not being wealthy. After the nasty court battle, she won. She successfully destroyed my family. Mission accomplished. It was a wake-up call to me. I didn't sit back at home and drink or wallow in self-pity. Luckily, my job offers free therapy for situations like this, and I took advantage of it. I joined the gym and played sports. I used exercising as an outlet for the anger and resentment that I have built inside. I knew I shouldn't be angry with my kids, but I still felt betrayed, and I tried my best to remind myself that it was my job as a father to protect and provide for them in any capacity. A month after the divorce, my wife rubbed it on my face by putting a restraining order on me. Not only was I falsely accused, my kids were also taken from me, and now I am served with a restraining order. My family and friends told me to control myself and not to do anything irrational. I focused on my work and my health and ignored my family for months. I felt like they were better off without me. After the divorce, my wife bought a new car and quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom to a blended family. Our 2 kids and Sam's 3 kids, all teenagers. Sam had a younger daughter and 2 older teenage sons. I was worried that my 13-year-old daughter was living in the same house as 2 other unrelated boys, and I felt helpless that I couldn't do anything about it. 4 months after the divorce, I was in the best shape of my life. I made new friends and went on dates. I felt like the divorce and custody arrangement was to my favor because I had so much free time, but I felt empty inside. I missed the process of raising my 2 kids. I miss hearing their voice around the house. So I decided to visit my son at school during recess. When he saw me, he ran as fast as he could and embraced me. We went on a bench and he told me everything about what was going on in Sam's household and all the toys and video games that he was playing. He seemed happy and healthy and wanted to know when he was coming back home. It brought tears to my eyes to know that despite my financial inadequacy, my son still thinks about visiting home, even though he had a choice of living in Disney World. I went home a proud father that day. I told him not to tell his mother or sister that I visited him, and I would visit him at least once a week. So as time went on, I was visiting my son at least once a week, spending a few minutes with him before he went back to his class. On one of those visits, he mentioned that he caught my daughter wiping tears off her eyes like she was crying. I didn't think anything of it. It could have been anything. Then another time, he told me that he caught my ex-wife crying multiple times. I asked him why she was crying, and he said that she was upset at Sam. I asked him why she was upset, forgetting that he was a little boy. I asked him all sorts of questions to which he was clueless about. I went home happy because I knew there was trouble in paradise. I was proud to know that the only time I made her cry was when I caught her cheating. It made me feel better to know that she wasn't my problem anymore. Then one day I received a phone call from a number that I didn't recognize. When I picked up the phone, they hung up. After several days of this happening, I called the number back. It would ring, but the person wouldn't answer. It didn't happen again for a few days. Then same pattern. They call, I pick up. When I call back, the person would hang up. I had a hunch that it might be my daughter. So I used another phone to call back. And sure enough, my daughter responded on the other side of the phone. I immediately hung up. I knew that something was wrong for her to be calling me. My mind was all over the place. Was she hurt? Was she in trouble? Did she miss me? There was only one way to find out. Just like I went to her brother's school during recess, I went to her school as well. I was looking for her and I found her. She was with Sam's daughter on the hallway. When she saw me, she stared at me for a moment and turned around, then left. I thought maybe she didn't want Sam's daughter to know. So I sent her a text message telling her that I knew she was the one calling me and I will always be here for her when she needs me. She called me a few minutes later. She didn't say much and her responses were short. I left the conversation thinking that maybe she just wanted to hear my voice. I wanted to build on our relationship, so I would call her every day at the same time. Instead of asking her questions, I would just talk. Then one time she started apologizing for the things she said about me to the judge, telling me that her mom made her say it. I didn't dwell on that. I told her that I had already forgiven her, and I made it a point to remind her that she's always welcome home. It's been about 7 months since the custody hearing, and when she moved into Sam's house, she told me on the phone that she wanted to come home. She was crying when she was telling me this, so I was curious as to why she wanted to come back home. She wouldn't tell me anything. I told her that she's always welcome home, but her mom has sole custody of them because of what they said to the judge. I told her that if she recants her story, then her mom and I would have joint custody so she can go back and forth. She objected strongly that she didn't want to stay at Sam's house. I was worried that something had happened, and I didn't want to push her away with the questioning. We planned one day to meet at a park to talk. So we were at the park, talking as we walk. I asked her questions to figure out why she all of a sudden wanted to come home. She broke down and told me that she was pregnant. I felt like my head exploded. I tried to stay calm and not overreact. I asked her how long she had been pregnant and who got her pregnant. That was when she told me that she told her mom about the pregnancy and they had it removed. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that not only did my daughter get pregnant, it was removed, and all this happened without my knowledge. I felt lightheaded and just sat on the pavement crying. I couldn't control myself as I thought I had failed my daughter. I asked my daughter who was responsible for the pregnancy, and she hesitated and then said it was Sam's teen son. I was furious, ready to draw blood. I told my daughter that I would do anything in my power for her not to go back there. I immediately called my wife, telling her how evil she was for putting my daughter through this and not telling me. I could tell by the subdued tone of her voice that she wanted to keep it a secret and was playing nice to me. I didn't stop punching when my adversary is down. I called her dad and her mom and told them that their 13-year-old granddaughter got pregnant and their daughter had it removed without telling anyone. I had everyone on my side, exposing her as a selfish and irresponsible mother who put her daughter in that position. My daughter stayed with me that day. I got the police involved, so I opened a criminal investigation. But they couldn't do anything because the boy is only a couple of years older than her, so it's not statutory in nature. I was livid. I thought someone should pay for my daughter's lost innocence, but I knew that overreacting might jeopardize my ability to get custody back. On our next custody hearing, I saw her for the very first time since we divorced, and she didn't seem happy to me. She was in shape, dressed well, but didn't look happy. It gave me a lot of pleasure to stand in court and watch as the judge chew up on my ex-wife and her lawyer for lying and convincing my children to lie. She was lucky that she wasn't held in contempt by the court for manipulating our children to lie against me at our divorce custody hearing months earlier. I still felt like she should have gone to jail for that, and that if it was me, the judge would have locked me up. I hired a good lawyer this time, and I won primary custody of my children. My ex-wife received supervised visitation. Everything went well for me, and I was smiling like a joker when I left the court. I immediately got my daughter into therapy to heal the trauma she must have been through. My son was fine. I bought a 4x4 so we could go off-roading and spend some time together, and that was all he needed. My ex-wife only exercised her visitation right a couple of times and stopped because my daughter refused to see her. I still felt like there was more to it that my daughter wasn't telling me. However, I was content that I have my family back. We never talked about my ex-wife or Sam at my house, and I never say anything bad about their mother. My daughter ended her friendship with Sam's daughter. I didn't know the details, and I didn't care to ask. Then 4 months later, my ex-wife surprisingly filed for divorce from Sam, which came as a surprise to me. I didn't know what to make of it, but I was glad that her life was in disarray. Fast forward 4 years later, my daughter was almost 17, and she still have a terrible relationship with her mother. I know my wife is a terrible person, and I used to think my daughter hated her for covering the pregnancy, but then I wasn't so sure. I felt like there was more to the story. I have been spending as much time with my children since they came back. Our relationship was better than ever. One day, my daughter and I were on the balcony relaxing. I felt like asking my daughter why she hated her mom so much because it had been going on for so long. Her demeanor changed. She looked down, then raised her head with anger, saying that she confided in my ex-wife about what her creepy boyfriend was doing to her, and she covered for him. I was left stunned as she just got up and walked back into the house, leaving me confused. It took a few minutes to digest what she just told me, my mind wondering what she meant by that. Not wanting to jump to conclusion, I got up from the chair and chased after her. I sat her down and convinced her to explain what she meant. It was hard for her, but she finally revealed that the person that got her pregnant was not Sam's son, but Sam himself. Apparently, he had been buying her silence since my daughter became friends with his daughter and eventually got my daughter pregnant after she moved in full-time with him. Maybe my daughter was his target all along. When she found out that she was 2 months pregnant, she panicked and told my ex-wife. Instead of my ex-wife protecting her from him, she was more concerned about keeping me in the dark. My ex-wife eventually confronted Sam, but they kept it behind closed doors and convinced her to remove the pregnancy. I immediately went to the police with my daughter and we filed a police report. Sam had already moved out of the neighborhood, but he was arrested at his new home, and my ex-wife was later arrested as well. My ex-wife took a plea deal and confessed and was a witness in the case. She was given a short sentence of 6 months and probation, while Sam was given 22 years in prison. He will probably get killed in prison when his fellow inmate finds out what he did, and I will do anything in my power to make sure that they know. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. Please make sure you share your opinion on the comment section and hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you and have